call this regular meeting of the Wetzel County Board of Education to order. We will begin with the flag pledge led by Mrs. Nice, followed by a moment of silence. Anyone not wishing to participate may stay seated.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. The next item on the agenda is the budget carryover workshop.
Good morning.
It's all yours.
So, just to reiterate what we're doing here, there's the main budget's going to be done here at the end of next month, I believe. And that's where we're talking about some serious money, all the oil and gas, all state aid if we receive any, all the federal programs. What we're talking about today is just the carryover, or some people might call it the budget surplus from last year. And if you don't have a budget surplus, you're running into deficit, which you're not allowed to do. So we have a surplus, and we have a significant surplus. And there are some reasons for that. One of the main reasons is, of course, you always have this oil and gas the past several years, but we budget for most of that. But we receive those ESSER funds, which are gone now. But when we received that federal help, that inflated a lot of county budgets because they were using those ESSER monies for some additional items. But in some place, you were allowed to what's called supplant. There's supplement versus supplant. And normally with federal funds, you're not allowed to supplant something you're already doing. You have to add to it. Well, with these funds, you were allowed to supplant. And we did. We paid for 62 teachers' salaries out of those federal funds. So what that did was freed up some extra funds, which we used most of. We used some of it for some HVAC projects. But there were some surplus funds there. You also get to charge indirect costs, which is something you do on all federal grants. For example, a Title I grant that we receive, there's a portion of that, it's a small portion of that money that goes back to the county for all the other overhead costs that aren't paid out of that grant. Well, with your ESSER funds, there's also indirect costs as well, so that's a whole bunch of money that runs back to the county that we didn't budget, becomes part of the carryover, and we're budgeting today. The purpose of today's meeting, in September, when I presented the financial statements, I let you know what our number was for our carryover budget. And I said, at the time, I brought you a budget supplement that moved all this carryover into one line item, which was it was a contingency line item. It's a temporary placeholder for it, is all it was. We're going to put it there, and I said at some point we're going to have a meeting where we're going to move the money from that line item to the various areas of expenditure. Everything has an account code in this system. If we're paying special education, it comes out of a 21 something code. If we're paying CTE, it comes out of a different code. I have to make sure that money is all put in these particular line items, so when I report to the state, they can track expenditures and make sure that we're not overspending or underspending in any of these line items. So that's what, you see all these budget supplements and transfers, that's what I'm doing. So everything right now is in one line item, not where we're spending it. We're going to talk about it today. Hopefully by the end of the day, we agree, and then at the next board meeting, I'll bring the official transfer, which say I'm now moving this $9.6 million, a transfer from that one line item into all these different areas that we're talking about today. So we used to do this without a board meeting. I mean, it doesn't necessarily require a board meeting. You would approve this during the transfer. But with this kind of money, it's worth talking about with the board, make sure we get some kind of consensus on this is what we want to do with these funds. Some of these things we've already talked about and agreed to. And that's what I'm going to talk about first. But, you know, I think last year we didn't have the meeting because that bus garage was looming over us, and that's part of why we're having this a little late. Sometimes we have this meeting, might have been in November a couple years ago. It's a little late for us to have this meeting. Not too late, but it's a little late. But part of the reason it's a little late is the bus garage kind of put things on hold a little bit. If we weren't going to approve that bus garage, then we had a whole lot more money with this carryover to allocate. But if we agreed to the bus garage, which we did, and we're making progress on that, then we need to know that we're doing the bus garage before we go forward, because that's one of the first places we got to put additional money. So what I want to do is go through this line by line, and tell you what our, the process, real quick, the process consists, it's a year-long process. The day after my budget meeting, which is coming up here in a couple months, the day after that meeting, there will be somebody that comes to me inevitably and says, hey, we need a new forklift. Well, we didn't budget for that forklift, so I've got to find the money for it somewhere. It's the only thing that keeps me sane with all the money that we have here is I have to have a budget for everything we spend. And so if it's not budgeted in the spring, I need to make sure that the carryover takes care of it if we're doing it, or some other funds. Like right now, we're getting a lot of bank interest that we haven't budgeted yet. Thanks to what Matt's doing with the state treasurer's office, the interest rates they're giving us. So there's some additional funds this year that'll become part of our carryover if we don't commit it already before the end of June. But that's how your carryover grows, because things that we didn't budget, extra taxes come in, extra bank interest comes in, or we don't spend as much as we thought we were on a project, that all becomes part of the carryover. But part of this process is I listen, I take notes, we go around, we visit all the schools, we have principals meetings, we take principal requests on things they want, and then Mr. Doty, myself, superintendent all get together and we go over and compile these lists, get budget estimates for them, sometimes actual numbers for them, and then we say, okay, how do we recommend that we're going to allocate this money? And we can spend it tomorrow. We spent some of it already, as we'll talk about, but this is money that's in our budget right now. This isn't next year's budget. So whatever we do, if the new projects, we could do a requisition for tomorrow. So that's the good thing about this. So let's go down through the list. And the other reason why this number is a little higher, and it's a good thing, so I'm skipping the third number down from the top there. It says carryover minus encumbrances. Basically, that's our carryover is $9.8 million. And some years, I believe last year, we had already spoken for about maybe it was $4 million, I can't remember. Click on this cell for me, fixture 22, second try down there. Go up to the top. So last year was $4 million. That number that's in yellow, that 250,000, last year that number was $4 million. What that means is we didn't have enough money in this existing budget. We didn't have enough revenue to do everything that we're doing. So in order to make it work, we said we're going to have to borrow from whatever our surplus is. Without adding any projects, we had to borrow $4 million. Not literally borrow from anybody, borrow from ourselves. We're going to take this carryover, we're going to reduce it. We can't spend it. But the good news is, I'm sorry, this year, it was last year. This year, we didn't need it. This year, the only money that we're taking off the top is $250,000. We're required to budget something there. We said we only need $250,000 of our $9 million estimated carryover to balance the budget. That's already spoken for. So when it was $4 million last year, we were in a tough bind. It was 2 years ago, I misspoke. Because this year we had enough taxes, we had an increase in taxes that we didn't need to do that. So when it's all said and done, we've got $9,595,469.01. So how are we going to allocate those funds? So I was going to go down through this. You can stop and talk about any item along the way. All you got to do is stop me. But I want to talk about how I got this organized. And then when it's all said and done, we can either say, hey, there's something on here I don't like, there's something on here I do like. And we can try and get, it's hard for me to get a consensus, because sometimes one board member doesn't like it, but I've got to make the determination, do we have 3 board members that are still gonna vote for that transfer? But we'll hopefully work that out today. When it's all said and done, our recommendation is all of this, what we have on these first 2 pages. And so, the first item on the list, there's no money there, but I always have it on there, is unbudgeted salary over the funding formula. Used to be that was very common. We didn't have all this oil and gas revenue. We had to cut a lot during our regular budget, and we knew we were short on some salary line items. We knew we're going to have to use some money to supplement salaries. We don't have to do that now. I've got enough budget already in this budget that covers all that. It's on here just as a reminder. That's always the most important thing we have to do, is we have to meet payroll, and we've got it covered. So everything in green here, which is a lot, and part of that's because it's so late. Most of these you already know about. You've already approved. But there are things, everything in green are things we've either already spent the money or we've already committed those funds. So I'm saying we really don't have much room to play with most of these funds. We can talk about that as we go down. But the first item we've talked about many times, we needed an additional $3 million for the bus garage, sewage treatment plant, that whole area there. And that's kind of a moving target. It's not all over the place, but there are always change orders. And there's one right now that the architect's been trying to get a hold of me for 2 or 3 days. I just tried to get a hold of him this morning and missed him. But there are things like where we're parking our buses. When we did our original estimate, our buses were going to be parked in one spot. We've now got more concrete. We've got to lay, you can talk about that if you want, but basically it's to work with some of the neighbors there and not make as many noise pollution or other pollution towards those neighbors. So we're moving the parking a little bit, which is going to increase the cost a little bit with some concrete. But anyway, that $3 million has a little bit of a cushion in there, but we've already have some money setting aside. This is what we've talked about many times. This is to get us to where we need to be. That's already done. Of course, we know about the Rite Aid building, which we're not going to call the Rite Aid building anymore, the new maintenance facility that we purchased. The board's already approved that. This is where the funds are coming from this. The next 2 line items are $200,000 and $200,000. They're both related. So the temporary bus garage, which if you've seen it up there, it's amazing to me how quickly they got that up. Still some things that need to be done there, but that's part of the cost in here. And then the walk-in cooler and walk-in freezer, we knew there'd be a cost for that, plus some minor renovations to the building, some of the walls, some garage doors we've got to put in there. So this, we believe, will cover the total cost of all those renovations. So it's, again, we haven't spent all that yet, but we've committed to that by making the decision that we need a temporary bus garage and we need to move people out of the center. So that's why it's green. It's already taken care of. We need to have the budget there for it. Tree removal was something we did at the new maintenance building. The substitute policy change. Again, we agreed to that. It's not going to cost us $250,000 this year. That's an annual estimated cost. We don't know what it's going to cost. But at your next board meeting, I believe, or maybe your last board meeting, we hired a couple new subs, correct? That were retirees.
Yes.
So it's wonderful, but it is a cost to us, because part of the reason we're getting those subs is the reason we made the change is there's an increase in pay for those subs. So, and we think it is working, right?
We don't think we know.
We know that it is working, so it's helping out with those vacancies in our classrooms. But there's a cost to that. We already talked about that. I just need to make sure I have the money there. Again, if it doesn't cost us $250, if it costs us $150 this year, that's just $100,000 we add to our carryover next year for our next meeting with this, that we'll spend it and then. But again, that was an estimate at the time. Hard to track that cost too, but I've got some estimates there. The next amount is something we've already talked about as well. That's why it's green. This spring salary supplement to help retain our teachers and maybe attract new ones. That $2,000 May, spring supplement, there's a cost to that wasn't budgeted with my original budget. So estimated cost of that is right around $1.1 million. This is where I'm getting the money in the budget so we don't overspend those line items. Special education bus shuttle, the budget shortfall of that's something we're trying to fix. All of the shuttles we're running is costing us a fortune with the way things are set up. We're trying to do better with that. We've talked about Edulog before and the hourly timesheet system with our GPS system that we're working towards. We're getting there. I just had a meeting with them last week. We've had several meetings trying to get that set up. That should help with some of this cost. But right now, we're possibly overpaying. We're paying what we're required to pay on some of these shuttle costs, but we didn't have enough budget there to cover all those costs. Interior door, window shades, safety. I'm gonna let Todd talk about that real quick.
So that began with Mr. Kelch contacting me earlier this school year after the fire marshal had visited Long Train School. And some of the doors had like the covering where you can kind of see through, but on the window of the classroom door, and the fire marshal said that's no longer allowed to be there, so they scraped all that off. So after talking to all the principals and also reaching out to the SSO, we purchased these lockdown shades for the county for everybody.
Yeah, not a major cost, $8,000 in the scheme of things, but that's already being done. A small amount here, relatively, $30,000 for a special education 3-year bump for speech pathologist plus back pay. May or may not remember that, but the state changed their position on whether special ed teachers get a bump and math teachers get a bump. It started a few years ago where they get 3-year bump, like 3-year increase, because they're so hard to find. Special education got that as well, but the state's position all along was speech does not get that special education bump. But they changed their stance on that. We went back and picked up the back pay for that, and that's the cost of that.
Was that one of that item was one of the things that they made a presentation to the board?
Yes,
before?
and they made it before, and we said we're sticking with the state's recommendation, and we did. I don't think we did anything wrong ever.
No, we corrected what
We corrected that because the state corrected in their mind what happened there. So, CTE positions and supplies, all that is when I did the original budget, we we changed some of our structure here. I'm looking at JC and Deanna, it was kind of, and Amanda, they were all involved with that, but when we added that, when I budgeted the existing positions we had in place. Well, that changed at the end after I'd already submitted my budget, so I have to find a budget place for that. Special ed aids to cover expected special ed. You're getting a lot of attention today. Special ed, the IDEA fund, which covers a lot of our special education costs, is not enough to cover everything that we're doing. And I'm just looking at the budget. I say there's no unbudgeted salary over the funding formula, that first line item. There kind of is with our aides. I kind of put it in a different spot. We did not budget enough money. The IDEA funds did not cover all the costs of all of our aides in our county, so we have to pick that up somewhere. Something else we did with special ed was, it's a minor cost, $10,000, but it's covering special ed teachers during their planning period. We made a change because we were having trouble getting coverage. And so by making that change, there is a cost to that wasn't budgeted. You want to talk about that change really quickly?
So, this year we offered, a stipend for if, a meeting, we have to, have our IEP meetings, our SAT meetings, 504 meetings, and there's just not enough time in the day to do it. And we have to give teachers a planning period, so if they were using their planning periods for those meetings, then they were compensated.
Everybody was compensated the same amount?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, okay.
The next item there is New Martinsville School asbestos abatement, carpet and tile. Every time we have a carpet and tile, Jamie can talk about that a little bit. This is an old one. Go ahead and talk about this.
It's just, most of the rooms were abated. When we started this project, we ended up finding 4 rooms that were not abated, so it was one of those things that, once the carpet was ripped up, you had no choice.
We budgeted for the carpet and tile,
Yeah,
we
just
didn't
not the
budget for
abatement.
the abatement process, so we had to find extra money there for that.
It's kinda like construction with roofs, you start tearing off carpet, and then you find out that there's carpet and tile, and then tile under tile, so when you find that, then you don't have a decision, you just gotta do it.
This is just something that was not in the budget, 2 vision screeners for nurses that was purchased. I noticed there was a hole in my budget in that line item, and I needed to make sure I get the money placed there. Magnolia High School's cooling tower. Talk about that, Jamie, because I don't know, have we talked to the board about that yet? We have?
We approved it.
And we got-
You approved the
it.
purchase, thank you.
Yeah.
So, again, it wasn't budgeted for yet, we knew it would come out of this carryover, and you got your bids on that, and that's the best we could do there. PCHS speaker system in the gym, we've done some speaker systems in other gymnasiums, and this is one that needed an upgrade. Shortline School had a freezer that went down, so we didn't really have time to wait for this meeting to get that done, we had to replace that.
Do we have alarms on those when they get down? Do they let us know ahead of time?
No, we don't. That is something I am looking into though, for us to add this coming year, so that we will have, especially for the summer. We've caught several just because of summer school, but Shoreline was the major issue, it just kept going down, so. But we are definitely gonna look into some type of alarm system for them.
Will that alert someone?
It would alert me,
down or-
it would alert me.
Okay.
We always have these sort of issues, and I budget for some of it, but we have some, heat pumps that went down at Valley High School, just supplementing the budget there. Greenhouse supplies, we're just honoring a commitment that we made 2 years ago to the Valley Greenhouse. We've put greenhouses in all the areas that need them, all the high schools. Valley, we put one in a couple of years ago. They had a $50,000, I think you were principal there, they had a $50,000 hydroponics grant there that we were able to convert into the greenhouse. They also got $50,000 from NCTE funds that we put towards it, and the county said, well, since we covered the whole cost of the other counties, we'll kick in $50,000 as well. Already did that, this is some money, rather than blow it all once, Matt's keeping track of it, and they're doing a good job of spending that money down. I just wanna make sure we honor the commitment we made to them, cause they really came up with $100,000 of the cost of that greenhouse. So, and that's all that's left there. And this next one, I'm gonna have somebody else talk about that. You wanna talk about that, the Wetzel County Tech renovations? So part of what we're doing with the bus garage, we're looking at a change order for the renovations to the Wetzel County Tech facility, basically where the freezers are now. Somebody else wanna?
Well, we're going to add ProStart, the ProStart, so we worked with McKinley to work on plans for that. As you know, we purchased the Red A building to get our maintenance and our storage out of the tech center, so we can put more programs in there. That's one of the big programs we wanna add. We also wanna add, Grow Your Own, the drones and robotics and going towards, pre-engineering.
Those are the 3 big ones.
Yeah, but what was the other thing we're gonna put out there?
Options.
Option program, so that our kids don't have to go away to mock tie if they are in a position where they need to gain credits, because of falling behind. So that's where and we already did some adjustment to the walls out there to make more classroom space. They were, how they were kinda like,
Yeah, the training room.
Angled
The
off.
training room got separated into 2 classrooms, which is perfect for Mr. Hearn in the electrical, because he's actually have a classroom now, and we'll be able to put more area for the electrical out in the actual lab.
And just, these are estimates, they can go up or down, but these are estimates, and there is a cost to that. I need to make sure I have funding there for moving forward. And then, early on, there were some, with the additional electrical students we had, we needed to make a $14,000 purchase basically for some electrical supplies out there. A lot of that comes out of CTE funding, most of it does. In this case, the county kicked in a little bit because of the growth of that program. And then you just talked about the classroom walls that we did out at the tech center. So when that's all said and done, you know, we've spent the lion's share of that carryover by things we've already committed. So that only leaves $1.3 million basically. And I hope you don't go back on at least most of these things because they're already in process. So I'm gonna continue on down through and we can stop at the end of this page if you, as you want, but, so basically, I'm gonna flip, we're not gonna go through it yet, but those last 2 pages, I keep a running list. Those aren't items, I don't like to say no, I say we're put on hold for future funding. It sounds better, doesn't it? So, the last 2 pages, we don't have a lot of estimates on some of these, but basically, we're moving some of those items up or adding some items to this second page that we feel is the recommendation we want to do with this carryover funds. And these aren't committed yet. They'll be committed after we come out of this meeting, I hope. But I want to go through these items here at the bottom of that second page. And if you look at the very bottom of that page, it says total available after recommended projects, 0. Because this is how we recommend we spend the entire amount of the carryover. Everything in green that we've already done, plus what we're recommending here. If there's something we wanna do, we've gotta move it out of here, move that other, something out of it to move that in here. And it's always tough, because there are things on those last 2 pages, that we know we wanna do, we've wanted to do for many years. It's just, the funding right now is not there. I am gonna say this, I need to say this,
Right now, you need to say this?
well, at some point, you need to know this. There is, I got the assessed value projection. I actually did it Friday afternoon on my dad's bed as he's taking a nap. I got the projections from the assessed values. I haven't had time to really review it to nail it down, but I think it's right. We are looking at a significant increase next year. Possibly an additional $37 million. So you can smile at that one, because that's unheard of. So next year's tax budget, when I start putting these numbers together, and it's the oil and gas, I mean, we know what it is, it's finally catching up to us a little bit. So this is one thing, when we talk about, that money doesn't come in until July. So, but that's finally real. I've expected an increase, but that's finally real, and we're kind of catching up. We're still not past Tyler County or Marshall County, but we're catching up a little bit. And it's the new wells, the oil and gas. And I do want to say that it's going to drop here in a couple years, because there's a 2-year lag. So if anybody's got oil and gas, I'm not going to point anybody out, some people do in this room. If anybody's got oil and gas royalties, they've seen their checks drop significantly the past year. And it's a 2-year lag. So what's going to happen in 2 years is it's going to be based on 2023 numbers and 2024 numbers, and those values are going to drop. The numbers we're getting now are based on 2022 numbers, which was a great year for oil and gas. So when that happens, we're catching up 2 years behind. I know it's hard on individual taxpayers who aren't getting the revenue, but they're still getting the tax bill. That's what's happening now. They're getting a big tax bill, but no oil and gas revenue in comparison. But anyway, that's big news. So a lot of things on this list we may be able to do next year, or we may be able to, which we'll talk about at our next meeting, squirrel some of that money away for some bigger projects. Like we'll get there.
On these recommended ones, I just wanna
Thank
clarify.
you. Did I do good with that?
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Like you said earlier, you you guys went out and you met with the principals and you talked with the directors, so this isn't just your wish list.
Right, and I can even tell you,
Every school's, every attendance area has been,
if you see this as, I don't know what color that is, I'm a man, so
Beige,
beige,
I guess.
if you see it in beige,
Jimmy's shirt,
what's that?
looks like Jimmy's shirt.
Yeah. If you see it in beige, it was specifically asked for by the principals. And sometimes the principals, like the water tower wasn't in beige, they didn't ask for a new water tower, I'm sorry, that's kind of a bigger priority than anything else on that list. So there are certain things they don't ask for. And there are certain things they ask for that sound good that we're just like, we just can't do that. Sometimes we have to say no to some things. But everything in beige on these next 2 pages were specifically asked for by, first one that just popped out is something that is not on this carryover list. I just saw additional 261-day custodians. That's something that was very common amongst the schools. They're not getting enough summer help. And so we used to have 261-day custodians, several, I don't know, there were several 261-day custodians. Well, times got tight here in Wetzel County, and we cut those contracts back. And so they weren't working in the summertime. Well, times aren't as tight anymore. The problem's gonna be finding people who are willing to work it.
Correct.
But it might help a lot with, I've got several former principals in this room. They're shaking their head yes, because there's never enough help for all the mowing. Even the mowing, then nothing gets done in the schools. So it's something that'll come later. It's not part of this budget. We're not doing it now. But that's just something, for example, that I know when we went around to all the schools, they were saying, we really need this. So, yes, this list isn't just our list. It includes things the board might have said in a meeting, and I've said, okay, let's put that on the list. And so the first line item on here, I've got it listed as 4 vans, and that estimate of $60,000. Basically, I'm friends with the Tyler County Treasurer, and I know that they just bought a $60,000 used van, and that's what they paid. You buy a used van because you can get it now. You can't get them quickly, and you don't have to go through all the time for the bidding process and all that. So we can do this however we want to do it, but for right now, that's an estimate. Now, what are those vans for? Somebody else can talk about that. You can probably figure it out.
We have two right now that are old and high mileage and really on their last legs. And we've been using them because of the shortage of bus drivers and getting kids to their activities. So when we talked about the vans, having one at each attendance zone will be way more beneficial for each high school / pre-K 8 school, that they would have more access to that. We've had, I don't wanna say we've had some fighting over the vans, but with only being 2, there has been some times where people are upset because they weren't available because somebody else was using them. So just the time of what's happening, we talked with the principals would really like to not have to have them housed, so to speak, in one location where it's hard for them to get it, so that's why we came up with 4.
I have a question, maybe this is, if it's out of line, just tell me it's out of line. For our employees that are not bus drivers to be able to drive a van, they have to take a class, is that correct?
Yes, defensive driving,
And there's no charge for that, right?
yeah, there's a charge for it.
Who has to pay that?
As of now, the employee is paid for it.
And the other paperwork and stuff that goes along with it,
There's also a DMV background check,
which they have to pay for?
right, which is $750. The BREM defensive driving class, I believe, is $19.95.
We could assume that cost if we voted to do that, or do other counties do that, or?
I'm not sure, that'd
I
be
would
up to
assume we
you all.
can pick up the cost of that, but there are a lot of things we don't pick. What other things don't we pick up? Like, or do we? I mean, there are other driving, what are costs that bus drivers have to pay on their own, or are there new bus drivers?
If it's required for their job, we have to pay for it.
If it's required, we
So
pay for it.
physicals, anything for that nature.
There you go. Background investigations
We
when
don't
we
pay
hire.
for that.
We don't pay for that. So there are some things.
renewals are $35.
There are people now in the county
Thank you.
that decline to drive, or fine. They don't think that they should have to pay those fees to be able to be qualified to take students wherever they need to go, or take field trips, or, at some point, I think,
Is that, you saying there are, like, there are people that are saying they're not doing that?
yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were asking
No,
or
I'm not-
saying.
I actually had a meeting Friday with math teachers about textbook adoption. Actually, that was actually brought up, just, we were just having a roundtable discussion of things.
It's an easy fix, really, but
Yeah.
a lot of times an easy fix isn't an easy fix. That's why I asked about the other things, because then it becomes the next and the next and the next. So we're just trying, I don't know enough about it, I'm trying to make sure we're consistent. Because somebody said, well, the speaker system's down at the field, why don't you just replace it? Or I could give another, Huddle, why don't you just cover the cost of Huddle? Well, then, it's kinda like why we're buying 4 vans instead of one. I mean, everything's, you have to think down the road, but this is something if the board thinks that's.
If it's like $20.
Right.
And somebody wants to take it, I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. The background check, if everybody has to pay for that themselves, that's $750, well, but I mean, if you don't think there's a problem with that, paying the $20 for them to take the course, I don't.
I don't.
I don't think we should not pay it and those people not be available to drive. I mean, and Teresa knows way more about availability of buses and bus drivers than I do. We've got people now that are driving, parents that are driving their kids to events, and which is, I'm not a real big advocate of that. I mean, if it has to be, it has to be, but if there's any way that we can help qualify people to drive the vans, I think that's a drop in the bucket. I mean, that amount of money.
But I'd like to just say that, to caution, if we're having other employees drive vans, I don't know if we're getting in to pay them to drive the vans, or that's volunteer basis. If we get into that situation, we may have even fewer
Oh, I
bus
understand
drivers
that now.
taking
This
trips.
would be, this wouldn't be a paid person.
Okay.
They would
Okay.
already be getting their salary. I mean,
Okay.
they're already a county employee, as I understand. That's the only people that could drive them.
Mr. Castello, going
Yeah.
along with the policy we're discussing, it's in policy as well that a board employee, as long as they have permission from the other children's parents, when there's a shortage of a driver of some sort, they can transport.
Right.
Okay, cause that's out there wrong for some reason across the county, cause I've been asked that at least a half dozen times this year that we took that out, and we did not take that out, that's in policy.
Yeah, I think sometimes it gets a little bit, they get a little bit left to center when they start,
I don't wanna get
Start
stuck on this one too much, but like, I've had to drive kids for basketball, or they've always reached out to me, hey, we don't have a bus. If I don't have enough seats in my vehicle, do I get to use one of these, or is that not because I didn't take that?
Actually, you're not a board employee, so I don't think you can drive.
Oh, just kidding.
What'd you say, Ben?
You're not actually a board employee, so that does not apply to you.
See, that's,
But we can
I set
transport
that
students.
straight then, so.
That's in one of the policies that we approved, that board members.
I think he's talking about the
They're
van.
board employees,
Board employee.
not board members. There's a
Board
very big
members
difference.
aren't in a policy that they can transport students.
Board employees, yes.
Board of Education members.
I don't think it's in there. I believe I was asked to check on that once before.
If I can ask,
We'll check.
if I can, just, here's what I'm envisioning, so help me here. So 4 vans, 1 at each attendance area, sounds beautiful, right? Simple, easy access. Who's gonna make sure it's filled up with gas? It's gotta still go where the gas is. It's still gotta get there. And I'm telling you, I can see it now. It's gonna be sitting there, and the next person's gonna go to get in it, and they're gonna say, and then what they're gonna do is they're gonna come to you and they're gonna say, can we start using the P card to buy gas at Go-Mart? Because that's the way I think. My brain thinks 100 miles down the road sometimes.
So I think we'd have to put a system in place for that.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea. I think it's in some ways a needed idea. But we would want to think about how.
I think that.
Let's let Matt address this for a second, because he
There
handles
are-
the P card. a
There
lot.
are fuel options at each location. We do have the tanks. It's
Not one.
Well, just the gas is at the tank. But then we do have fleet cars at each school. So they could check it out, proper channels, go fill it up, sign off on a receipt and check the car back in. There are things set up for that. if
But it
that's
will
necessary.
happen like you're talking about, but there ought to be ramifications for that, and we've dealt, you've handled our vans
I've
before.
dealt with that, and it's a nightmare, and they bring them back dirty, unfilled, dinged. I mean, they don't treat them as, it's not their property.
Well, but
There are
I've
problems.
taken
I
them
think-
several times in my garage.
I think at this point, that's something that needs to be investigated further, but as for today's budget session,
Yeah.
we're looking at the amount of money and that we wanna get for. So I
Mr.
think that can be discussed further in another meeting.
Mr. Castello, in answer to your question, it says a professional employee is a regular employee by the Board of Education as either a full-time or part-time professional employee, professional substitute, or non-certified coach.
Okay, thank you, Mac. I know I've read that someplace that board members can transport. I stand corrected if I'm wrong, but you're reading out of county policy, right?
Yes.
You are saying that they'd be like one at each school, at the 4 high schools or how?
Yeah, yes, well, the attendance zone, cause
Right,
there are
yeah,
middle
yeah.
school kids may need
I
them as well,
understand that,
yes.
yeah,
Yes, one for each attendance zone.
okay.
And it's not something we wanna do, it's something we're forced to do. You all know about the amount of trips we've had to cancel. I mean, maybe this would help us with some of that. We're not trying to hurt bus drivers' salaries.
This is more necessity, this is not like, oh, let's do something different, this is, if we had enough bus drivers to take every trip, I don't think we'd even be talking about this.
Well, I'm fine with this. I mean, seem to be the one that throwing a monkey wrench a little bit in the works. But, you know, then, like, Mrs. Nice, you're not trying to track her down to drive, and you're not trying to track somebody else, another teacher from another school. You know, we've got short line school parents driving kids from Magnolia to events and everything, like, whatever works best. And it's gonna.
We just got an email the other day from somebody pushing some vehicles, but said that most counties are looking at this option right now. They're having the same problem.
Wouldn't the process still go through get denied first before the ban option?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, that's,
bus
Okay.
drivers would have the first option.
Oh, yeah, I would never advocate taking a trip from them by any stretch of the imagination.
Never.
No, I mean, that's just not even on, if anybody's listening out there, that's not the purpose of that.
bus drivers ever drive the vans.
It says professional employees.
So we have to change the
We
policy.
started down that road, and we had bus drivers say, I'll drive the van, but they wouldn't wanna drive the bus.
I understand.
So they didn't do less bus drivers.
It's not that we don't have enough buses, we don't have enough people to drive.
Exactly.
The next item, we got, and it's yellow because it's not an official estimate yet. We're waiting on an estimate for power washing the outside of some schools. It might be a little high, but you've got an estimate, Jamie, short line and long drain.
Yeah, I've got 2 companies that they've been there twice looking at everything, but it's like everything else, radio silence, you get no information back from them, and then all of a sudden, they would just show up. So, we just estimated just to try to cover something, so.
So this kinda goes back real quick, the power washing the outside of schools, we don't have enough help to keep up with our buildings at this point. So as we went around to all the buildings inside and out, there's a definite need for us to take better care of our homes, so to speak.
I think short line and long drain was put down there just because I think they were requested.
They were the ones that asked for this.
Specifically. Not that other ones don't need it. The contracted painting, let's talk about this a little, Jamie, what this estimate.
That is basically all the common areas, so like Magnolia High School. That was everything, first floor, second floor, and the bathroom, but no classrooms.
Again, a freshen up, we walk into some of the buildings, the paint needs a touch up, and we just don't have summer help or the capacity to do those kind of things.
And that is,
We'd like to eventually get to.
And Martinsville School included the gymnasium as well, correct?
yes,
Is that just like the gymnasium being painted at New Martinsville School? Is that just the walls painted? We're not talking about
walls and the ceiling in the gym.
Yeah, but no, we're not talking about decorative,
No, everybody wants every mural that you see at every school that's asked for painting, that are covering them all up.
okay,
Magnolia, every mural, gone. They want them all covered up, every one of them. Like New Martinsville School, for two coats of oil base, what we've got now is $167,300. That does everything and all the common areas for Magnolia, sorry, not this is Magnolia. This does the commons area, all the academic hallways, and upstairs and downstairs bathrooms. So the gym's not getting painted because it already got painted a couple years ago. New Martinsville Schools was the gymnasium, the main entrance, the main hallways going down, across the corridor in front of the K1 gym, all the K1 area, taking that old fabric that they had on the walls, sanding the walls and painting all that. Theirs came in for 2 coats. Now they broke it down into separate areas, but altogether it was $128,500 to do all of New Martinsville School.
There's certainly more painting that we wanna do, just,
Systematically, as we get more money or get more funding.
We picked the biggest schools to get the sticker shock out.
New Martinsville School says build new parking lot. Have we talked to the board about this yet?
This is part of
Not as a
the.
board.
Not as a board, okay. This is the part where we're never going to be able to make it perfect. The way parents drop off and pick up, the clog on Route 2, we're never gonna be able to make that perfect. However, we've been looking into that, the whole area, and kind of adjusting and putting some more parking out back, because we own a bunch of that land out back, not taking away from the kids' space, but we have some space that we could put to try to alleviate some of that clog that we get in the morning. So that is where that's coming from.
It'll also help with the man trap issue, cause one of the things the board's already approved in this year's budget is $250,000 towards man traps, which we know is not gonna get every school. But New Martinsville School is a problem area with man trap, because we have people coming from 2 different directions, there's doors on each side. If we made that front lot a parent drop-off only, parent drop-off pickup only, no employee parking there, then that's your entrance for the public. And so then you can make your man trap in one spot, not have to worry about them getting into the true man trap. So that's part of the issue here too.
Well, I think the biggest thing of it is the safety, because right now it's just crazy. Afternoons, it's just not safe.
And Todd's been really working on this project for us as far as the safety goes there, and also we've worked on kind of a list of all the schools in the order which we feel we need to attend to their safety needs, and New Martinsville's definitely first on our list.
It becomes a much more efficient and true man trap the way we have it planned. And as Mrs. Porter said, McKinley has told us it won't completely fix the problem of the parking issue, but it will help it a lot. When we have talked, when you think back to when New Martinsville School was built, the hospital wasn't there. The neighborhoods that surrounded it only had a few homes. That was just a lot of open land. So you still have one red light and you have a lot more things that are built there now. So there's gonna be a traffic issue, but we can make it a lot better, is what we're being told.
I'm fully in favor of that, cause I've never been up to Steelton except in the last couple of years when school was dismissed, and it's a madhouse. And if we build a parking lot back there, we need to have, and I think you all are thinking about it, we need to have some kind of plan for the front too. I mean, you got people parking in the grass, you got people on the
That's part of the
berm.
plan.
We do,
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
The
And
flow,
hopefully,
the flow of traffic plan.
and hopefully the fire department, I think they're getting the old armory building, and they may be, that might be an area right around there that will have more flow to get out of there and everything. But I'm surprised somebody hadn't gotten hurt badly up there. Sorry.
And going around, we noticed, well, maybe this is different, I'm gonna skip that. New Martinsville School bathroom renovation, the large countertops there and that need renovated there, that's the cost, estimated cost there, $55,000. the MHS downstairs restroom renovation, you'll see this a couple times. Some of our public restrooms areas are not in the greatest shape, so we're trying to, without kids tearing them up, that's part of the main problem, but we're trying to make that a little better, cause our public sees that, and VC wants to say something really bad right now.
No, he didn't, go ahead.
No, Mr. Kimball will echo the same thing I had. You know, we've got kids that are, it's fact, I mean, we've got kids that are damaging restrooms constantly.
That's
And-
not a new problem.
No,
Yeah.
I know it's not a new problem, and it's not a problem to Magnolia or Valley or John Marshall or Wheeling Park and everything like that, but that's what the public sees. I mean, they don't see the restrooms upstairs, they see the downstairs, so I'm fully in favor of that, but,
Okay, let's
sorry.
move on then, if you're in favor.
The next three items, we've already set aside $2.5 million for the Magnolia Athletic Complex. That's something the board's done in the past,
Was it a prior budget issue?
from prior
Yes,
budget.
yes.
So there's no money here listed, but I wanted to talk about this now. You see, I have no dollar amounts because that's always the dilemma is, what's the saying? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good, whatever that saying is. The point is, we haven't spent much of that money because we're trying to come up with a good plan. Are we moving the football field? Are we putting a track around the football field? There's always the turf question. Are we doing that? There's all these questions, and $2.5 million is a lot of money, but it's not enough to do everything you want to do. So we've been sitting on this. We have some drawings, we have some plans, but meanwhile, while all this is happening, our restrooms are terrible. Our visiting bleachers are terrible. There are a lot of problems there that aren't getting addressed. So when we talked about this, is maybe taking some of that $2.5 million and these three items that I have listed here. Well, the track repair, I mean, that's gotta be done. It's track season. I haven't heard much. I don't know if you have yet, but we'll have to take a look at that track, what we need to do. Maybe it's minor repairs now. The visitor bleachers, we talked about. You know, the hesitancy of replacing those bleachers is, what if we move the field? That's on an elevated, I mean, we've talked about this over and over and over again. Mr. Barker's been part of it. Mr. Doty's been part of it. But we could purchase some bleachers and set them up there, but we know that we might end up moving those somewhere along the line. But that's something we thought about doing. These are our public areas. And the other one was the restroom renovations there, which are in bad shape. So is there something we're missing there? Field house, what are we missing?
I think we had those things listed because the track has several holes in it, the surface, and then the restrooms are in very bad shape, and then of course the bleachers.
Well, the first two that are on there are safety issues for sure. I mean, the track, kids can be injured on it, you know, like getting hurt. Like the high jump area needs to be patched for the season right now. And the visitors bleachers are that's an accident waiting to happen. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. The man from the company even said that. He said, "You're nuts." I said, "Yeah." And the restroom is because that's what we did years and years ago to improve.
Really, the restroom, like the girls, the women's restroom down there, everything really needs done to that. We've already got new commodes, new sinks, so basically, whenever the boosters and them designed that building, they put shower curtains up instead of stall doors. So we're just basically trying to put stalls inside there instead of just having a curtain across there. The boys' restroom is just, it's I don't wanna call it a lost cause, but it's up against the back of the or the field house with all the stone walls sticking out. There's really not a lot, you know.
That was where,
Yeah,
that's where the old restroom was, and all we did was volunteer help.
Yep.
Was take the stuff out, and those three things need to be done.
So over the years, we've replaced commodes, we've replaced urinals, we've done all that, so it's just a little bit odds and ends. The majority of the complaints that you ever get is in the women's with the curtain, the shower curtain in there. So it's getting measurements to see if we can actually get stall doors that would fit between the block walls. If not, then we have to tear the block walls out and just put all new partitions, you know, in that bathroom.
I thought I heard that they say that
the field house is in pretty bad shape, need really redone completely, tore down, there needs to be a dozer start right there on
That's
one
what
side and just take it through all of it. That's what I've been told.
To redo that though, that's when you're looking at redoing that complex and not
Right.
some
but-
temporary fixes right now.
Right.
Yeah.
But if it's in bad shape, we need to, I mean, we're spending $2.5 million right now, so. I mean,
Well, we're not.
No, we're not.
That's
I mean,
the
I
money
know
we
we-
have sitting there.
I know, understand that.
Okay.
But that, I'm with you, I
But
agree
that's-
100%, for a county with money, it shouldn't be that bad. I
Correct.
agree 100% with you, but the question that we always fight with on this is, and I'm in these committees with Magnolia graduate, I mean, they definitely want what you want there. But the question is, if we do it and then move the field, then we've done something in the wrong place.
I wanna do it once, I understand that, but my question, my thinking here is just, if we're, first thing, why are we going to move the field, but the second thing, if we're spending $2.5 million. Well, that's just, $2.5 million is just what was set aside. I understand that. That's not what, you're not even gonna have an eighth of that for what these renovations you're gonna want done, so.
And it would still leave money there if we can supplement the budget later to actually, and the moving the field thing is something that, it's,
For the
most
track.
fields have a track, we can't have track meets really there that are worth anything. Most fields now have a track around.
Same way.
What's that?
And that's another thing, so times 4.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Alright, just saying, I'm just saying we spend this $2.5 million, if we do something like that, we need to think about the whole thing.
I understand where you're coming from.
Alright,
And the other schools, I mean, we put new bleachers in at 100. We purchased a baseball field, and it's not like we haven't addressed the other schools. Valley, we put new bleachers, new press box in. We've done a lot of athletic complement. Actually, Magnolia was one of the last ones on our
and I
list.
know we haven't
Right.
done anything.
Yeah. And the bleachers, I think, probably your dad was part of raising money for the home bleachers over there.
He was superintendent, we put the home bleachers in, correct?
And it wasn't county funds, I don't believe. So there's a reason why that money was put towards Magnolia. Payton City Elementary blinds, it's a small cost, it's just some rooms, they need some blinds. The other ones have all been done, these are just the missing ones.
It's just a different style. They had vertical blinds because they called them rescue windows, so you had to and they're all starting to break, so now they're just going back to the roll-up blinds like the rest of the classrooms have.
Payton City Elementary, again, there's no cost here. There are a few more things that need done on that project. There's some lighting, there's some concrete or asphalt work around the gymatorium. There's not enough money left in the remaining budget to do all of those things, so we'll have to find time for that later if we're gonna do them. But there is about $58,000 remaining in the budget that's unspent. So I'm not asking for money now, but I'm saying, why don't we take that money and explain what this is, Jamie?
The old air handler used to sit in the downstairs basement in the boiler room, basically, where it was at. When they took the air handler out and designed the new system, the new stuff wouldn't fit down in that area, so they had to put everything on the roof. So now we got an open room. Well, when they made the change, everything's up. There's 2 pieces of old ductwork that are like 5 foot by 5 foot that they just cut off and capped and left it over to the side, which when you walk in the door and you turn the corner, it's right there in your face. It doesn't need to be there. That needs to be taken out. But then we built a building, wow, man, when was that? 6, 7, 8 years ago?
Back behind,
But behind the kitchen there, we built a building about 8 years ago and put new coolers and freezers in because the ones in the building weren't big enough to do anything. So now the plan is that now that all of that's gone, take those coolers and freezers and put them in the building so the cooks don't have to walk back and forth across the parking lot to get into their coolers and freezers. So the only thing that'll need done with that is when they designed the area, they put the sprinkler system in, they didn't take into consideration that the freezers are 9'8" and they set the one main sprinkler line at like 9 foot. So we have to just put a little jag, move the sprinkler line up, but other than that, it's just taking the cooler and freezer apart that's out there and just bringing it in, putting it back together.
But there's money left over from.
There's money enough to do that project, yeah.
In its entirety.
Yes. And then, again, going around to the schools, the Payton City High School multi-purpose bathroom is, and the public uses that facility. It doesn't look very good, there's a renovation there we'd like to get done. And then the next one, somebody can talk about that as well, I can talk a little bit about it. I wrote on there, depends on if it's just repurposing of office or building an addition.
So there's no, female changing or restroom at their back weight room area at Payton City High School. They have several offices in there, and they have a couple toilets for the men, but the girls have to change inside and then go out. The number of girls that are taking, weightlifting is increasing. Actually the kids asked for this, and then the principal, could they please have either part of that made into a girls' changing area or a small addition put on so they could have a changing area right there with the, changing room bathroom right there with their weightlifting.
Curtain wall replacement, let's talk about that. Who wants that? Todd, you sound like you're ready to talk about curtain wall.
Okay, so the curtain wall replacement has been coming up, for the past couple of years, and that is our top safety concern in our county. This goes back to when the grade schools were built, and the fad at that time was the open classroom concept across the nation. Mrs. Bonner shaking her head, she remembers that. Didn't last very long, so people figured out this isn't very good, so they started throwing, walls up. But we have, as I spoke to our principals earlier on across the county, a total of 45 at least. Mr. Jody, you said you counted more than the principals counted?
Yeah, like I said, I went off the blueprints, and there's some, I thought there was more than 13 at that one school, but we'll have to go up and take a look at it. But
Okay.
That's just an estimate.
So between our 4 grade schools, 12 at Long Drain, 14 at Martinsville, 6 at Payton City, 13 at Shortline, at least 45. We have instances where the back part of the room is divided by a curtain to separate rooms instead of a wall, to separate those classrooms. And we have different places across the county in all 4 of those buildings where you can get access to 4 or 5 rooms. Curtain, 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 curtain. We need to put walls up.
So this would be taking down the accordion stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, take the accordion
And
curtain
put
down, and
block
just put
in.
solid, no, just put the solid metal partition
Metal.
like we have the rest of the buildings,
Okay.
just be put back up in there.
And then finally, this estimate is probably not enough, but we don't have an estimate yet for radios, walkie-talkies for all schools. Some schools have requested that. Cassie, you wanna talk about that, or?
You want me,
Yes.
you want me to talk about that? I'm meeting with a representative from Law at the end of this week, actually. So we'll have a better idea, but we're looking at putting walkie-talkies for all of our staff at all of our schools.
For safety, ease of communication.
Every employee would have one,
As needed.
practically every.
Yeah, let's go with that. I haven't had the meeting yet, so it's just
Yeah, but I mean to say.
say that flat out. Yeah, that's a good idea.
The majority of people in the building would be able to communicate
Correct.
with each other.
Years ago, we had them for grade level. And the main reason then was so that, like, if you were out at recess
Right.
and a parent called or something happened, or you had to get in touch with somebody, you had them.
2 of our schools don't use them. I think the most we have at one of our schools is about 10 or 11, if I remember correctly, and the rest of the schools have about 3 or 4.
And so if you look now, total available after recommended projects is 0. That spends your carryover, and that's our recommendation. I'm not gonna go over everything on the next 2 pages, but I just wanna point out a couple things. Again, we don't have estimates on most of these. Some of these were just given to us, in the past month, and we haven't developed estimates yet. But people wonder, how come we don't have this? How come we don't have this? Well, if you flip to the last page, just on what we have estimates for, there's $14.5 million of requested projects on these 2 pages. And there's several expensive items on here that aren't even on here. We don't have $14.5 million to spend. That's $5 million than we have in our carryover right now on what we already have written down on the page. And that includes items that is a hot topic here in this county sometimes, is air conditioning in our gyms. They're all on this list. And these are how it's not done. It's not done because you have to bounce something. You have to bounce something on this list, and if there's something you want to bounce, we can bounce it. But I think we talked about important items on here. And maybe, if we want to put air conditioning in the gym, then we do have a windfall coming next year. Maybe we can plan on getting that done. That's something we can talk about at our budget work session. But that's just an example of, that's why it's not done. You see the reasoning, when people say, I can't believe you don't have it, you can look at this list, there's not anything on this list that's frivolous. I mean, there are reasons why we don't have some things that we don't have. Plenty of valuable things on these last two pages that, Shortline School's roof, there's one. Shortline School roof replacement is $1.8 million. That's the estimate from a couple years ago. It's an expensive deal. It's going to need done. We can't do it with this carryover based on what we've recommended. So when we do our budget next year, I'm reasonably confident that'll be something that I put on a request to the board to do with our budget. There are plenty of items, but that's the same thing. Do you do HVAC in the gym, air conditioning in the gyms, or do you do $1.8 million on a roof? And that's the decisions we're always faced with. We've had tight budgets, not as tight as some of the southern counties, but because we have the number of schools that we have in this county, we have tight budgets. When we're doing one thing, we're doing four things, and that adds up. We're doing one sewage plant, we're doing several sewage, we're doing one playground, we're doing several playgrounds. And trying to compete with these, don't understand why Tyler County, who has 2 elementary schools and 1 other school for middle school and high school, with more money than us, that we can't compete with that right now. And more money, I never thought I'd say that, but yes, more money than us, but we're making a big impact next year, I think, with our budget. So this is my recommendation. If everybody's fairly, and again, some of it's just a budget, but if we get a green light on those items on that second page, we're gonna start moving forward with most of them right away and keep you updated as to where we are on it. But if everybody's okay with that, I know what I need to do, and that's bring a budget transfer to you for all these different account codes next board meeting and say, we're moving the budget there. If everybody's okay with that. Now, there's a long process that goes into this. I think I'm very proud of our process with this. I think it's a good system.
And to reiterate, this is not the regular budget. We will still be doing that.
Correct. This is
This is the carryover.
carryover from June 30th, 2023.
We need to be able to do this. I think that's what the board was elected for, was to look over this stuff. And in years past, like, things were done and nobody, gee, where'd that come from? Is this somebody's dream or something? And now the public knows, because Amanda's here broadcasting this, that, we're talking about these things, and we're talking about what balances some other project or not, so.
Just a couple quick things. Number one, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a lot of work, and I've always appreciated, you and I have talked about this in the past, you take a generally conservative approach to budgeting when it's estimates, and then you can always come back when the money's in the bank, right? And now you're not worrying about, is that money actually gonna come through or not? And so I've always appreciated that about your approach
Thank you, Mr.
towards financials. The other thing, just a couple of quick questions that I'd like, and I'll explain maybe here in a minute why, and Jason, maybe you can help me here. What is the current number of students attending the tech center?
Like right now,
Like right now, how many kids are going to the tech center?
off the top of my head, like 120, and that's with the 8th graders.
You have projections for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I brought this list of kids that have signed up and are getting applications in. So I mean, the numbers are coming in really well for the programs for next year.
Okay, you mentioned 8th graders that you're counting
Yeah.
in that number. Maybe I could ask this a better, how many are officially signed up for each of the particular specific course designs that's in the?
Right now,
Yes.
that's over there right now. 45, I think.
Could we have that for the,
Can
have that for the next board meeting?
And I'm not trying to trap you here. I apologize because you didn't know I was gonna ask that question, so you don't have those numbers in front of you. But and here's all transparency, right? I did the math. $3,100,000 of those green items was the advancement of the tech center. when we bought the extra maintenance building to create the space, the renovations, $3,100,000. And I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying, we're all in. We're all in, on the tech center. And my only reservation is we can't kill existing things to build new things. And I didn't know when I could say that, right? I didn't know at what meeting would it fit. And since all the money that's on this list was being talked about as it relates, it allowed me in a meeting to say it. And I'll, anyway.
So can I add this?
Sure, absolutely. I'm not.
So I hear what you're saying and understand that, however, we are not equitable in how we deliver a lot of our programming. So our thought by advancing our tech center, because we have kids from all schools going there, all school kids are available to go there, but all schools do not have all programs. For example, the Grow Your Own program is currently only at Magnolia. Next year you have 15 kids signed up from around the county to attend Grow Your Own, which will be housed at the tech center. So in our thinking, it's more about equity, so that all students have the opportunity to take whatever program they would want to take.
And I'm not challenging any of that.
I just wanted to put that out there.
I think it's just in fairness to folks to realize that this is a significant investment, that we've made into tech, and for all the right reasons in many ways. But sometimes when it all happens in piece here and piece here and piece here and piece here, you don't necessarily appreciate the fullness of what's happening there. And when I looked through that, it just jumped out at me a little bit. So anyway, that's all.
But are we going to start taking away from our schools, or our high schools, like Valley and 100 and
Well, so for example, so next year when we do scheduling, some kids will have the opportunity to travel to the tech center, but for example, Valley, the only place we offer journalism, and this is not a career tech, it's not housed at career tech, but the only place we offer journalism is Valley. So next year in the fall, we're going to make that via technology available to all students in the whole county.
But there again, you're going to be pulling away from schools, all schools.
No,
That's the opposite of what Mrs. Porter described. We're gonna be able to leave something that's at a school, like the journalism offered at Valley, and offer it to a student at Payton City High School who doesn't have that opportunity now.
Via tech.
But via technology.
Right.
It's gonna be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll
In other words, they don't
it'll
have to leave
stay
their own
Valley.
so there will be
It'll stay
programs
Valley,
that,
but-
it's gonna be a plethora of programs sprinkled out, but some of our big programs that we need equipment for, like our electrical program. All kids in the entire county can go to the tech center to take that. We couldn't have that in 4 different places, because that's a hands-on kind of thing. We only offer Pro Start or Baking and Pastries at 2 of our schools right now. This way, all 4 schools have had the opportunity to take that class. But for things like journalism, some of our theater
Physics.
programs, physics, we're gonna have to offer a whole bunch of different things, different ways next year, depending on where your butt sits in the seat, or whether you're going to our tech center.
And it's gonna be virtual.
Some of it will.
I mean, not all of it, but some of the programs, like, the kids will take journalism virtually.
Right. They'll get to see the teacher teaching it at that school, and it'll be broadcast
The
to
ones
the
that
other
lend
schools.
themselves to that, you couldn't be doing Pro Start virtually or anything like that.
Right, those kind of, the classes we can't do virtually will have to be housed at our tech center, so all students have the opportunity to take those classes.
Can I expand on that just a little bit? So last week, I had a meeting with principals, and we sat down as a group and we decided, we looked at what was being offered in different places in the county. And in particular, we were looking at our core offerings, particularly ELA, science, math. And, we found out that, there might be one school that gets calculus. Well, that's not good. And we found out that some schools some schools are doing financial algebra, some schools are not doing certain classes. So we figured out what we're going to offer as basic offerings, and we didn't mention our honors classes or our dual credits, because we'll still do that. But after we figured out what we're gonna offer mathematics wise, and we looked at policy, state policy, and what is required, you know, what kids have to have, because they have what's called prescribed courses. You know, like for instance, mathematics, a prescribed course is, in order to graduate, you have to have Algebra 1 and you have to have geometry, okay? Those are two that you have to have, everybody has to have, okay? And then you have, other courses out of those 4 credit requirements for mathematics, the 4 that you have to have, that we are required as a district or school to offer. And then on top of that, there's some recommended offerings. So we looked at the required offerings and the recommended offerings, and we talked about the personnel that we have, and so we're going to offer these, let's say 7 to 8 math courses, okay? We did the same thing for English language arts. We did the same thing for science. We did the same thing for social studies. So the principals are going to have, after we have our Mrs. Porter and Mr. McPherson go out to the schools and talk about RIFs and transfers, that kind of stuff. After that happens, then the high schools are going to ask their students to look at those offerings and decide what they would like to take, okay? So after we get that information, then we're gonna come back with our high school principals and our counselors and sit down in a room and talk about what this would look like across our district and what our school, each school, you know, has strengths. And we'll kind of put it together and say, okay, this course would probably be a good one that we're going to try to do virtually. You know, it may be based at Magnolia, but we're going to offer this virtually so kids at 100 or Valley or Payton City all could be able to participate in that. We're not doing this for every class, but we're going to have offerings throughout the county. You know, Mrs. McPherson will be able to get an idea of what we're wanting to do, and then we've already budgeting so that technology is not going to be the factor. You know, we're going to have everything lined up and be able to provide training and offerings for those courses where we want, you know, to be able to do that. You know, and they mentioned with CT courses, there's some things that we can't do virtually because there's so much hands-on, you know. But just as Mrs. Porter said, we have so much inequality going on across county with our 4 high schools. You know, Payton City has some good things going on. 100 has some excellent things going on. Valley has some good things going on. Magnolia has some good things going on. But everyone doesn't have all those components going on. So when you have 4 schools, we can't. You know, this is a solution that we're looking at. Okay. We're also, should I expand on what we're doing in Martinsburg?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Wednesday and Thursday, Magnolia has a team of Miss Miller's going, and I think she has 3 or 4 other staff members going with her. And Payton City has 2 teachers that are going to go to as well, and I'm attending. We're going to Martinsburg High School, and we're going to spend some time there on Wednesday and Thursday. We were invited by Education Alliance to just look and see what's going on at Martinsburg. They're doing something innovative that we're looking to try to do next year as well. It's kind of innovative to help kids. They're doing some co-teaching in some other core classes. And this is not special education co-teaching, this is co-teaching. And for instance, I'll just use an example. They're doing co-teaching with 11th graders in what's called contemporary studies, social studies class. And they're co-teaching that contemporary social studies class with their English 11 teacher. Okay? This takes takes place during one class period, okay, so 2 core classes being co-taught, okay? At the end of the day, at the end of the year, those kids that pass that co-taught class, they get 2 credits. They get their social studies credit and they get their English 11 credit. We learned about this through Education Alliance, and also I learned a little more details about why this works and is very highly acceptable through the West Virginia Department of Education. Last November, when I was sitting in a meeting with State Department person Joey Wiseman, and I'll refer back to Policy 2510. That's kind of like the Bible of West Virginia Department of Education, and course requirements and everything. Used to be, it was gospel, so to speak, that you had to have 8,100 minutes of instruction per year. Okay, that is not the case. It's all about standards and whether the kids are getting the standards and mastering the standards. Okay, that's why English 11 and social studies really go together, because the projects that go together to show that the kids are mastering the standards. We've been doing this for, I'm thinking about 3 years or so. They started doing this at Martinsburg, particularly with kids that had failed some of their core courses. So what was happening was, they're coming junior year, they're doubling up on these course requirements that they have to have, along with their regular stuff. And so they thought, well, we've got to try and find something, because these kids, they're not able to get to the tech center, and they're not able to get into the CT electives. They're not able to get these things that would potentially keep them in school and interested in school. Okay? They found that by doing this, and they were also doing it with mathematics and science, they linked up, their first linked up with math and science was applied statistics, which is a required offering in Policy 2510, and is actually an upper level math, okay? And environmental science. We only had one high school in our district that was teaching environmental science, and that kind of stopped when Peyton Study lost Carolyn Heiser, because that was something she was doing, okay?
Mr. Houston,
Yeah.
could I cut in for just a moment?
Yeah.
Could we put it on the next agenda for you to share back with us what you
Oh,
want?
I will.
Because we're actually under budget carryover
Oh, I'm
workshop
sorry.
still. and
But
that's
this is
really
what
not-
we're talking about, budget.
Okay, all right, as long as you can tie it in with
It
that.
relates to CT
Okay.
and budget, and so, I'm sorry, so, but we're gonna check this out, and in a nutshell, basically, 82% of those kids were mastering those courses, and they were actually getting upper level
It
courses.
does have room to take the CTE courses that they
Yes,
wouldn't have
I'm
because they'd
sorry.
have to redo.
Yeah, go ahead,
No,
talk about next board meeting in great detail.
Okay,
Mrs.
thank you.
Bonner, if I can just, I'll be quick. Kinda touching on what Mr. Price was saying, next year our plan is to try to get, we have a math and an English teacher out there.
Right.
We're going to try to get those kids, not only those 2 classes, and give them an opportunity to maybe stay all day and get extra time in the labs, and maybe do some peer mentoring that way, along with maybe what she was talking about with the civics being teams in and stuff like that, so the kids, if they wanted an option to stay there to get more CTEC time, there's a chance that they could.
But they wouldn't have to, they could
No,
still.
absolutely not, no, they can absolutely go back and, to their home school, that's not, but we've pulled the kids, and those kids want to be there, they love being in the shop and stuff, but that's also an option that we're trying to get them.
And according with that, money-wise, budget-wise, those 2 positions, if I remember correctly, are paid through by a grant from the state, is that correct?
Yes.
And it
So
conti-
we're not paying those salaries to put them there.
and it continues, right? I mean, that's a continuous.
Okay. So, anything else for the budget carryover?
No, I will bring this to the board, the actual account codes, at the next board meeting, to transfer it in there, and we'll start moving forward with some of these items. And I know Mr. Doty is a very busy man right now, and you're thrilled with some of these items, but we'll try and get together soon and see how we can get some of this stuff done.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Mrs. Porter, on that? Okay. Yeah, do you need to go? That's fine.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
I'm getting all my updates and we're all right.
All right, the
Thank
next
you.
thing on the agenda is personnel overview.
Mr. McPherson?
Okay, I prepared a brief 4-hour presentation, so I hope you guys are ready. No, this will not take very long. We just felt it was probably necessary. It's been a while since, honestly, since personnel's been really addressed in our county, just to make sure everybody knows what page we're on, and from a general standpoint, where we're headed. No specifics at this meeting, that would be illegal and inappropriate. So let's talk about something that was kind of, it was amusing to see made it to the budget, and that is the funding formula. We hear about it all the time, and we find ourselves to be number one where we prefer not to be number one. We're over around 100 in the service and around 100 in professional, give or take. I had Mr. Lancaster dig up some information on the funding formula because I wanted to understand the funding formula, and he got me a very nice 10-page report, and I read through the whole thing, and it funds you X amount of teachers and X amount of service personnel per 1,000 students. I read through that whole 10 pages, and nowhere in that 10 pages does it allocate more staff depending on how many buildings you have. It does not care how many buildings you have. It just cares how many students you have in your whole entire county. And you know that doesn't take into account, because of that, it doesn't take into account the size of the building. New Martinsville School hasn't changed size since it opened. In fact, there was more added to it. But the number of custodians that you would probably look at for that building has gone down with the building, and that goes a lot into some of these items that are on here, that we don't have the people in buildings to take care of things like we used to. And we even, I've only hired summer help one time, but it was a struggle to find enough people to put one person in every building, let alone 3 or 4 or 5 to take the load off of somebody to do painting and things like that. So it's a real problem. I did, and Mr. Lancaster will tell me, and he's right, that this isn't exactly how the formula works, but I think we agree that it is at least a good basis for comparison, that I took this funding formula and then allocated the number of positions it would allow per building based on enrollment. Does it work that way? It absolutely does not. They just give you an amount, but it gives you an idea and helps to understand why it's not possible for us to meet the funding formula. That is a dream that will not come true in Wetzel County in the configuration we are in. We would do a grave disservice to our students if we were able to make it fit that way. If you look at it now, again, it does not work that way. They give us a certain amount and then we allocate where we need to go. So I am going to ask this to send this down. And again, this is a very unofficial thing. I just needed something to wrap my head around. The funding formula is like a yardstick that we use for comparison. If we all use the same yardstick, it's a more valid comparison, and this is just the one I looked at. But when you look at it, and none of the quote cuts that we would have to make are possible to this extent at any of our schools. It would be impossible. We would have to completely ignore what's on that wall if we were to do it, because we would not be educating individuals for success. So there's enough there for every board member to have one. And as you look over that, like I said, please keep in mind that's not how it really works, but it's a way of comparing and thinking, okay, if we were trying to distribute, folks in a somewhat equitable manner, that's probably how a lot of times things are based on head counts in buildings or head counts within a county. So that's just a way of looking at it, and you don't have to look very far on that to realize that none of that's possible without hurting our students.
To explain one of those rows, because I understand it, but explain.
I should do that since I didn't keep one. You're best kind enough to.
Yeah.
So if you go across the top, the formula, the very first set of 3 columns is what the formula, based on the way I did it, would allocate for that school. If you go to the second set of 3 in red, that's how many are actually there. And if you go to the last 2 columns, the comparison is how many, if it was allocated that way, are quote extra. And we know that that's not the case. And there's no way that we could make that kind of cut at any of those schools and have our kids get what they deserve.
No tech center on here?
I didn't even include that, so that's actually make the numbers worse.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, I strictly went, did it that way. You know, and as it was pointed out earlier, we're lucky at the tech center that the state does pick up some of those positions for us so we can have them.
That's
So
fine.
that wouldn't be included in this. But I just do this to illustrate that the formula comparison is a difficult one with our county. I have it on my notes that it takes X amount of people just to turn the lights on in a building, and that number is like 6 or 8 people. That whether you have 100 students there or 800 students there, that we have that amount of people in the building because you need those people in order for it to be a school. We can't not have those people in place. So, you know, there's a set amount of people we're going to have no matter what. So that brings back to the idea of, and I'm sure someone will tell me that I'm using euphemisms, but realigning our staff. And we know what that really means, that we have to make some changes. Those changes are all governed by code. If you ever want to be bored out of your mind and have your head hurt, listen to some personnel stuff. I did a 2-day training myself with Bowles and Rice. That was great. Mrs. Porter and I attended a very nice 1-day training, and it'll make your head spin. Everything that there is. A lot of details to pay attention to. I'll make a personal observation. Some of you who know me will probably know this, that I don't like to make mistakes. I like to be right. And in this case, it's less about me and more that when I look at these details and think about the changes we're making, the biggest concern I have is that I would make a mistake that would affect somebody in a negative manner. So there's a human side to everything we do, and that's the human side for me. So a lot of attention to detail when we make these changes and look at things. Something that we should be doing, and we're going to do this year, it's in code. It's called the second or last chance pool. And you may know, if anybody who works in the school, and everybody who else here has gotten that email from me twice, that if you are going to retire, we have to know, if we know before March 1st, you get a $500 bonus. That's not just to give somebody $500. Code says if you know you're going to need a job next year, on or before March 1st, which matches the language of the retirement, that you have to post those jobs around now. Why? Because people who are affected by RIF and transfer get a chance to control some of their own destiny. And that's one of the things we will do on our visits is we will have a listing of all those postings so folks can know that, you know, we had to follow the process, but it turns out really all you're probably end up doing is bidding into a job in the same school you work in. And that's really how it's going to work in some cases. If we could sit everyone down around a table for about an hour and just talk through it, we could probably make all of our realignments in an hour. But code does not allow that. If it did, it would be a lot easier, but we have to follow the process that's the legislature, and we find ourselves a lot of times following processes from the legislature that we don't necessarily agree with, but we're bound by code.
It prescribes that you meet with each person individually?
It actually does not. Oddly enough, code just requires that you notify them, but I don't think there's anybody in the room that thinks that the best thing you could do is send someone a letter and then wait for them to get it. That's an awful thing to do to somebody.
We're both gonna
Right.
go out.
Well, I understand that, but
Right.
you're just referencing you can't do a
We can't just sit everybody down and start down the seniority of the people and say, you know, is that the one you want? Okay, great, done. Now the next person. It doesn't work that way. I think if we could, I think it would probably make the whole process a lot easier.
Yes,
But you can't.
but you're prohibited from doing.
We are. And so we work within the constraints of the system that we're given. But with the second chance pool, we will have that list when we meet with folks, and so that we can show them that you know, we may not need a position you're in, but we need a very similar position in a different grade level, because things like that happen. And when I look at that compared to what our maybe anticipated cuts are, the amount of postings exceed all of them because of our vacancies and positions we haven't been able to fill. You know, and we look at the formula, and you know, something that we don't talk about very much, but I've kept track of, is since the school year has started, we've absorbed almost 20 positions that we've come to realize we could cover elsewhere and not post. So, you know, some of these things happen by attrition where they don't affect anybody, you know, and of course that's everybody's goal, is not to affect people. So, trying to wrap this all up and put a bow on this discussion, you know, if we don't make cuts and we don't allow realignment, which will be people who may find themselves RIF turning around and bidding on a job, we'll continue to be what I call wrong staffed. We have people we need, we don't necessarily have them where we need them. If we don't make those changes, we'll have even more unfilled positions. What does that mean? Well, here's what that means. Our sub issue is exacerbated by the fact that we cover long-term jobs with people who might sub every day to fill in people who are sick. Instead, those people are committed to a long-term job for the entire year in some cases because we don't have a person to fill that job, and then we run into problems. It's gotten a lot better. I did do some math. I think we fill more than 5% more jobs since we made the policy change, and that may not sound like a big deal, but as someone who remembers what it was like to be a principal and did not live through that adventure, one more person you don't have to worry about is a big deal. But if we don't make it so that we can fill more positions, we will have the sub problem is exacerbated hugely by people who are taking care of vacancies on a daily basis. I mean, we have some people who have been in vacancies so long that we forget that they're substitute for us in that vacancy. They've been there for so long, they've spanned school years. And I did write myself some notes here. The only reason that our sub crisis isn't even worse than it is because there's some people who wake up every day and come to work, principals, secretaries, and teachers who say, okay, we're going to make this work today. And I think that covers up more of the problem than we realize sometimes because folks really do just make things work from day to day. And my closing line here is if we don't make some of these changes and realign some people, instead of saying we were 210 over the formula, if we made no changes and then tried to fill these things, we would sit here and say we're 250 people over the formula. I don't think that's the situation we would be in. And not only would we be over the formula, we'd still have jobs we couldn't fill. So that's where we're headed, and Mrs. Porter's 100% right. We decided right off the bat that we will personally meet with everybody affected because we owe that to our employees. No one wants to go through that process. It's not, I've been there a couple times. It's not a pleasant thing. But again, the number of jobs that we need filled versus the number of changes we've looked at, the jobs surpass the changes at this point. And again, that's a 30,000-foot view because we're not ready to get into the ground level details yet in public.
Well, and I see that a plus, I know roof and transfer season's upsetting, I can remember the fears. But it sounds like by readjusting where you're moving, it's gonna be better for students because they'll have somebody qualified in there.
At the end of the day, I think that's our biggest goal.
That has to be our first goal.
We are the Wetzel County Board of Education,
Right.
and education should be our business.
But again, I know it's difficult. I remember
It'll
the
be
one year where
emotional, it may
I
have
was
some
holding my
people-
breath with 34 years of experience and the least senior in my grade level, and it was,
Right.
Okay. Is this all going to be taking place then in this month?
So we are trying to be as quick as possible because we want folks to, I think people are on edge. I don't think I know. We want to take that away and let people know where they stand. And plus, with posting jobs that are available, give folks a chance to, we can post a job for 5 days. Within 5 days, somebody knows that, okay, it turns out this isn't so bad. I'm just changing grade levels or I'm moving to the school. Maybe I found out I always wanted to do this. It gives them that chance. So we're going as fast as possible. Meeting with Mr. Boothby tomorrow morning to double check all the work that I've done to make sure that it is correct.
Can I say something really quickly? Because I appreciate this. One thing you haven't heard Ben say is anything about money. Because in the past, that's what our RIFs were about. I mean, I've been here 22 years. That's what they were about in the, I don't know how you say, in the 2000s. That's what it was about. We got to cut because we can't afford. That's not the issue here. We have come to a point where we are not educating kids correctly, and that's what this is about. It's not a financial issue anymore, and that's I appreciate that, what you're
That's
saying,
exactly
because
right.
That's not the
Well
argument
said.
he's making.
Well said.
Any other comments?
Any questions on that process?
And if you find yourself with a question, you guys know how to find me. If it's a little more specific, just call and I will explain.
All right then, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Price, is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Nice, all those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries unanimously, we're done at 10:39.